keep making last 32s, that means I'll be in the top 64 and I'll keep my card. You need to eradicate all that and believe that we're going to be at the tail end of it. And I think that first win is exactly what happened to Chris.
Welcome to the story of the series here on the MODUS Super Series channel on Pluto TV, where we reflect on the careers and life so far of some of the top names in the world of darts. Scott Mitchell is alongside me for the latest edition, and we're going to be talking about Hollywood Chris Dobey. Scott, first of all, what comes to mind when you hear the name Chris Dobey? What are the initial thoughts that sparks?
Well, you think of what a good-looking fella he is in darts. You do think of that. And just what a class player he's become. He seems a very solid player who's able to 9 times out of 10 grab out of the game what he needs. And the way that he's in the Premier League and his progression, it's been so quick. And yeah, fair play to him.
From one of the big hotbeds of darts in the UK as well as up in the northeast, his dad was and is a fantastic darts player. Never really took the plunge in going professional, but Chris seems to be living that dream for him now.
Well, yeah, very much so. I actually met and played against his dad, Gordon, and his uncle Arthur. They were up there too. They were playing for Northumberland at the county system, and we'd see them at varying sort of BDO comps, say maybe the British Open up near Bridlington, up round there sort of neck of the woods, and you'd see him at county sort of knockouts and qualifiers and stuff. And just a few years ago, I think him and Chris actually played together in the UKDA Magic Weekend and won the pairs together. So I remember speaking to Gordon then, said, "Whoa, that was hard work today carrying the boy." But yeah, they've got a sense of humour, the pair of them.
Yeah, and Chris really, I mean, when did you first know about him? Because he didn't really play too much BDO stuff, did he? He seems to be one of the new breed of players who's almost spent their entire career in the PDC, the odd tournament here and there. But when did you become aware of him?
It was around 2014, 2015 time, I think. It was, I think he qualified for a UK Open for the first time. And, you know, I obviously recognised the surname because I knew his uncle and his dad. So I had a good look at what he was doing now. I think he lost to Aspinall in that first UK Open. And ironic now that they go on and they're really best of buddies.
Yeah, and you mentioned that time. 2015 is when he came through Q School, so really was pretty instant in terms of his PDC success, and stayed on the tour ever since. So it shows that, I mean, that takes some doing, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I think for anybody that gets their go on the tour, the main goal is to try and keep your card after the 2 years, and then sometimes you've burst onto the scene so quickly that your third year can be even more difficult than your second year on the Pro Tours. And I think that probably was the case for Chris, and he managed to keep his card. And once you keep your card for 3 or 4 years, then you feel like you're part of the furniture, you don't look over your shoulder worrying about whether you're going to keep it. You just concentrate on your playing, and that seems to be what he's done. And
there's been this kind of linear progression from Chris Dobey. He's not had the explosive start that the likes of Luke Littler and Michael Van Gerwen and people have had. He's just had gradual improvement almost consistently through his career.
But I think slow and steady wins the race. I really like that progression. I like the way that, you know, it gives you a chance to learn. It gives you a chance to take in the mistakes, gives you a chance to make sure that you rectify them and don't make them again. And I think I like the slow route. I like slow and steady. As long as you're still going forward at some point, even if you plateau out and you go again, it's much better than going backwards. And I would say that his career has been that to date, really.
Yeah, he's made quite early in his career stage quarterfinals, won quite early at the Grand Slam, but the first wins didn't come until, well, this decade actually for Chris Dobey. But he showed signs that the standard was there, didn't he? Because there were some performances where he put in huge averages, sort of 2018, 2019 and so on.
Yeah, there were. But, I mean, we say that he didn't sort of win stuff till then. We had the likes of Johnny Clayton and Gezi Price that were getting tour cards around the same time as Chris. Mm-hmm. And they were all making that progression at a similar time in a similar way and didn't always burst onto the scene immediately. So he was part of a crop and a bunch that are still there now and are very strong within the PDC.
Yeah, and he also got on tour at the time of peak Michael Van Gerwen, didn't he? And quite often he proved to be his nemesis. It took him an awful long time to get a victory over Van Gerwen. Do you think that in more recent years, we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but do you think in more recent years, Chris Dobey has thrived on the fact that maybe a few more players have got belief because there isn't the dominance of Phil Taylor, there isn't the dominance of Michael van Gerwen?
I think you have a very good point there, Chris. I think that could well be the case. I think, well, before Littler and Luke Humphreys will say, I think it did open up a little bit, and I believe that everybody felt that they had a good chance because everybody was doing that level. Everybody was doing the numbers, and we remember James Wade saying in a very famous interview that he did that he said the numbers are not that much greater than when Phil was here, but there are far more people doing them. And that was because of the Dobeys and so on coming through. So, yeah, I think it's a very important point, and it makes a difference.
I want to talk about the throw before we go into the achievements, because for me, as a darts fan and someone who would love to be a decent darts player, but that will never happen, it looks like one of the throws that you'd love to replicate.
For the purist, it is. If you were going to start teaching and training kids to throw, you're not going to teach them to throw like Dave Chisholm, maybe. You're going to ask them, look, here's a picture of this fella. You want to be as close to this fella as you can. The bionics of it are very, very simple. That it's just straight up, hold it to a certain position. He doesn't have a big backlift on the throw, which then also avoids any deviation. And then it's just a little backlift and a punch through the action. And yeah, it just looks as perfect as an action as you could get. And
that starts bearing through. Look, towards the back end of last decade, he's reached finals. He's had these kind of glorious defeats where he's averaged 110 in finals and lost out. But 2021 breaks his title duck and then goes on to win another one that season, both on the floor as well. Was that really the moment where Chris Dobey was starting to emerge as someone who could potentially be a top 10 player, a Premier League player, etc.?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what happens with a dart player when they win their first major thing, you set yourself targets and goals, and you want to achieve these goals. And when you get one of those titles, the next ones seem to flow along nicely because all of a sudden you're believing you can win one. Once you've got one, you walk into the room believing, well, this could be my day today. And once you start believing that, rather than believing, oh, it'd be good if I could make a last 32 so that if I keep making last 32s, that means I'll be in the top 64 and I'll keep my card. You need to eradicate all that and believe that we're going to be at the tail end of it. And I think that first win is exactly what happened to Chris.
And he seems to be one of those players as well who, now when we talk about Pro Tours and you say, who's going to win, he gets mentioned quite a lot. So people do see him, fellow pundits and players alike, as one of the top dogs.
But we have to say his floor game is exceptional. It's exceptional, and that's why he always comes up as a favourite with the Pro Tours. He if he gets a couple of wins under his belt early doors in the Pro Tours, then he generally goes deep into the tournament, and that's the reason why.
Floor form, fantastic. What about on the stage? He did have a couple of appearances in the Premier League as a challenger or contender when they were about up in Newcastle. That kind of readied him for what was to come next. But he was, of course, one of those players who would go and make it to the Premier League for winning a TV title. That floor form does seem to have translated to the stage, doesn't it?
And I think that was the bonus of that system at the time in the PDC with bringing locals into as a one-off. And I think that idea really did work. And Chris is one of the ones that have benefited from that idea. And he's gone on and knew what it was all about by the time he got there. It was nothing new to him, nothing to be fazed by. Because obviously the Premier League is very different. There's a lot of press and stuff the day before. It's a very different sort of animal to anything else you ever play in. So, yeah, he had a good chance to learn that when he went in as a wild card, so to speak, up in Newcastle. And the fans up there took to him, and yeah, look what he's doing now in the Premier League.
When he won the Masters 2023, he knew that the winner of that tournament would very, very likely get in the Premier League. That was kind of an almost unwritten rule then. When Johnny Clayton did it for the first time, they had no idea. So to do that with that pressure as well, the carrot of if I win this event, I'm going to be in the Premier League, that shows more than just ability, doesn't it? There's a certain mental strength there.
Yeah, there's a massive mental strength, and that's all about handling moments within big games that you know that you really need to win. You have to realise that they're big moments in the games, and not that those moments sort of own you. You have to own the moment, and he's a very good person at doing that.
And he's become a consistent performer in the biggest tournaments as well. The World Championship, he's reached the quarterfinals at least in the last 3 years, semi-finals at the last World Championship. But I want to talk about one match and how he's responded to that in particular, which was the quarterfinal against Rob Cross when he leads it by 4-0. No one had ever lost from that position before. He goes on to lose 5-4. That must have been an absolute sickener.
I think those losses, because they're so public, because those games are watched around the world, people will come up to you and go unlucky after it, but you don't feel unlucky. From 4-0, you kind of believe that you should have done a little bit more to fight your way to that fifth set. But for me, I think that was a big turning point for him. I think that was him handling every situation. That was him maybe as a younger lad thinking 4-0 up, I can't lose this from here, I can't. And he did. And I think that taught him one of the biggest lessons. And I think he's learnt that lesson, and that's made him a much stronger player. And you don't see him ease off the gas anymore when he gets a lead. He keeps going and going and keeps his foot on your throat. And I believe it was because of that game.
Highlighted by the very next World Championship where he gets to the quarterfinals, and this time he advances, which just shows that remarkable mental strength to be in that position again at the next opportunity a year later, and this time to get the job done.
Yeah, I think sometimes as a player, when things go wrong for you, you learn a lot more than when things are going right. You don't sort of remember the games that go really well for you, but the ones that have gone wrong and you've made mistakes, you know why you made the mistakes. And I think until you have that issue and you can't learn it. So I just think he's one of those players that now has a very focused mind. He knows how to win. He knows how to play the big players. So there are times when you see the draw or whatever and you come up and you think, I got Michael van Gerwen next, or I got so-and-so. He's not fazed by that anymore because he believes that he has the game to do it, because he's been winning on the tour, on the Pro Tours and winning majors.
Yeah, and it was Gerwyn Price that he beat in that quarterfinal, so that just speaks to the point you just made, that he's up for it against the big players, and he's amongst them again now, playing in the Premier League. At time of recording this, he got to the final of a week, but doesn't look like making the playoffs. Is there still a little way for him to go to get up to that very elite level in the game?
Possibly there is, but I think that this Premier League campaign that he's in right now is going to help him take him to that, because again, we've seen it before where, like you say, he's lost from 4-0 up at the World Championships. I think this will be another learning curve for him, and probably maybe the one that could complete him as a player, because the thing with the Premier League, you're playing the very best players. The other 7 are as good as you are. And if you have a week where you don't reach your A game, you get battered. It's that simple, because somebody will always be on their A game when they come to play you. So he has to learn that although his levels are very good and they're high, it's all about raising his B game now to a level that's even more difficult to beat. But one thing I like about him is you don't see him do 100 average one game and then an 80 the next. He's one of those that really does flatline in that mid-90s. And I think that's going to see him in good stead long term. Yeah,
and he's never really suffered a terrible Premier League campaign. I know he's only had 2, but he won his very first Premier League night, for example. I mean, what an impact that was the first time around. But you look at Stephen Bunting this year, Peter Wright for the last couple of years, they just get completely cut adrift. He is picking up points, isn't he, to at least give himself hopes of being in the playoffs. So he at least belongs in that top 8. I suppose it's whether or not he can elevate himself to top 4.
Yeah, and I think the way that the Premier League system works, I think if he can find himself in a couple more finals, he's got a few weeks left, and I think it's about 7 weeks to go, isn't there? So he's only halfway through at the moment. I think if he can learn from that first 7 weeks, and the draw is all about that as well, who you drop on in that first game, because obviously it all alternates. And your sequence of draws, whether you drop on Littler or Humphreys or whatever, is always difficult with the Premier League as well. But I think no matter what the outcome of the Premier League for him, whether he makes the qualifiers or not, and makes the last 4 or not, I think he will learn an awful lot more, and that makes him an even more dangerous opponent for for the rest of the players that play him.
Do you see him becoming a regular fixture in the Premier League like his beloved Newcastle, or do you think he's going to be more of a West Bromwich Albion, a yo-yo player?
No, I don't see him as a yo-yo player, because I think once you come away from the Premier League, he's not a yo-yo player with the rest of the system. So, you look around and go, is he going to plummet out of the top 16? I just don't see that, because the levels that he has there against those players is plenty enough. I think we've seen that you just need to step that up a little bit in that Premier League. And it's all about being in your purple patch, in your best patch, while you're in the Premier League. We've seen it with other players in the past, and he's just got to get the timing right. He's just got to get the timing right after the World Championships to be ready and raring to go once the Premier League starts.
Do you want to touch on actually that sort of association that he's got with Newcastle United Football Club? Because he's made that part of his image as well, hasn't he? Part of his brand. We've seen him with Ant and Dec in the past. We've seen pictures of him at football matches celebrating amongst the crowd. Do you think that's a good thing, or is it something that can work both ways?
I always feel that you need something away from darts. When you're playing darts at such a level, you always need downtime. Whether it's another sport, whether it's you start crochet knitting or whatever, you need something that you're really interested away from darts, so that there is time for your mind to just lose it and go away from it and not think about it and have days doing other things. And I think being a Newcastle United fan, going along to the games, I think is fantastic. The other thing is I also think that because he's such a top sportsman in that neck of the woods, he's looked at like he's the Ant and Dec of the darts world for the people of Newcastle. So you have to remember he's still a famous person, but he's keeping his feet well and truly sort of on the ground.
We're recording this just after Newcastle United have actually picked up their first major trophy in a long time. In terms of major titles, what does the future hold for Chris Dobey?
Well, I don't think he's going to go backwards anytime soon. And if you talk to older players, they say, their best times were in their 40s. They'd seen a bit of life. Their mind was a little bit calmer. Chris is only 34, I think, at the moment. So he's got a long way to go. I think he's got another good 10 or 15 years ahead of him, as long as he doesn't have sort of any injuries or sort of illness. But, you'd think the future's bright and long for Chris Dobey.
Potential world champion?
Yeah, without doubt. I don't see him not. It would be another injustice, a little bit like the Michael Smith situation where, it wasn't if, it was all about when, and when he allows himself to do it. He'll be in a side of the draw that gives him an opportunity. He's just got a lot look at the draw and think, whoa, this is my chance, because otherwise you put too much emphasis on it.
Seems like there are plenty more chapters still to be written in the story of Chris Dobey.